How did you use new media technologies in the construction and research, planning and evaluation stages? To create my media package, I had to use different types of technology. When looking at research, I created a blog on WordPress. Here I was able to create and post work. This was an ideal way to post my work, as everything was saved online, and all of my work was available to me as long as I had a secure internet connection. I was able to use different hardwares to upload my work. For example, I could use a laptop at home or even my phone. When looking at my research, I heavily relied on the use of the internet and websites such as YouTube. On YouTube, I was able to research social realism trailers and find the best ones that I wished to analyze. This allowed me to see what characteristics and conventions would be needed to make my product a success. To conduct my research, I used programs that I was already very familiar with. For example, I used Photoshop to create my mood board and my initial ideas. Photoshop allowed me to contain all of my images onto one page, and this was very beneficial as it made my work look precise and neat. To conduct my genre research, I used Microsoft Word. This was beneficial as it allowed me to clearly type up each convention that each different genre used. I decided to look at social realism, slasher and thriller. This allowed me to gain an equal insight into what each different genre was like and which one I wanted to follow. When creating my treatment, I first of all used Word to type up my treatment. I then decided to use Prezi. Prezi is a PowerPoint style presentation software that is accessible via the internet. It allowed me to portray my work in an interesting and unique way. I found Prezi very easy to use and it displayed all of my work in a clear, neat fashion. Using this new form of technology allowed me to present my work in a different way, and this made my work easier to look at and more interesting. When looking at my textual analysis, I heavily relied on the use of Microsoft Word and the internet to view my trailers via YouTube. I was able to simultaneously use both programs if I minimized them and use them both productively. This allowed me to finish my textual analysis quicker and also make sure I was examining every detail. When looking at my focus group, we can see that I asked 2 to 3 candidates to look at my work and then give me their responses. To do this, I used a Mac to record their responses. I was then able to analyze their responses and see what they thought. To create my questionnaire, I decided to use Microsoft Word. Here I was able to clearly create each tick box and each question was clear. We could clearly see where one question started and where it ended. This allowed my audience to quickly fill in the questionnaire. When looking at the construction of my product, I could say that I had to use new media technologies that I had not previously used. Firstly, I had to use Adobe Photoshop in more detail to construct my poster and website. However, I had to go in more depth with these programs. For example, when looking at my poster, we can see that the image used has been edited. To do this, I had to do research and see how images could be easily edited. To create my poster and website, I had to learn how to use specific features. For example, the text tool. I had to effectively create billing blocks and other details like the name of characters in the film. This had to be done with a professional look. To create the billing block, I had to go online and download a font called Steel Tongues. To do this, I accessed a website called DaFont. The same thing had to be done when looking at the font I used for the title of my film. This was the first time that I had downloaded a font from the internet and found it was very successful as there was a large selection that I could choose from. This allowed me to vary my product and made it look very unique. When looking at the smaller details on my poster and website, we can see that minor details like the logos of institutions had to be edited. Here I would have to use the magic lasso tool and crop the logo. I would also have to use Ctrl-I to invert the colors if they needed to be changed to stand out. To construct my website, I had to create a navigational bar. I found this quite difficult, as first a background white block had to be created to make the black text stand out. This was a very tedious task. However, the rest of the website was very easy, as most of the features that were needed had already been constructed on my poster. Using the inverse selection tool to change the color was very useful, as when looking at my poster we can see that the institutional logos are different colors, as 2 are white and 2 are black. This had to be done to make the text on the right hand side stand out against the black jogging bottoms that were being worn by the main character. When putting text onto my poster and website, I decided to use the text tool that was with Photoshop. This allowed me to clearly choose the font that I wanted to. In this case, it was Arial. I decided to use this font as it is very clear and stands out. When looking at the construction of my trailer, I had to use Final Cut. This was used for the first time. I predicted that I would struggle using this software as it is something that I had never previously used. Therefore, I decided to look up many different tutorials online. This allowed me to clearly see and find out how to use Final Cut Pro effectively. This was also done as part of my secondary research. The program was initially very hard to use. However, after a while, I could say that it became easier. For example, I was able to memorize shortcuts, like using A to select the pointer tool and using B to select the razor tool. This made it much quicker for me to edit each different scene and saved me a lot of time. To create my intertitles on my trailer, I added the text on top of the background image that I had decided to use, which was a blank screen. I decided to use the same font so my house style was consistent. When looking at the title of my film that comes on towards the end, I decided to use Apple Motion. This was extremely beneficial to me as it gave my title a very unique look. This way, when my title came onto the screen, it flickered first of all and then faded out. This would not have been able to be done using Final Cut Pro. However, using this new media technology was very difficult and I had to look up tutorials online. I also had to use the text tool to create the review quotes that were in my trailer. To do this, I first of all created the text and then imported the screenshot of the stars. This meant that my poster, website and trailer all used the same review quotes. This made them all look very consistent and created house style. Once I had created the text onto my trailer, I used a simple transition fade to remove the text from the page. I decided to use the Urban Jungle font throughout my whole media package. This allowed me to create consistency. However, the rest of the text that was visible was using the font Arial. I decided to do this so that viewers were not bored by consistently looking at the same font. In my trailer at the beginning, we can see I have a scene where traffic is somehow sped up. To do this, I first of all recorded the scene for a lengthy amount of time. I then imported it into Final Cut Pro and sped it up. This allowed me to give the effect as if time was continuing. When looking at Final Cut Pro, one of the features that I found most useful was the use of fades. I was able to use fades in and fades out so that my trailer looked as if time was just continuing, and it did not look as if it was done by an amateur. I have cut out many parts of the recording so that it seems as if time is sped up. I wanted to do this so that viewers would not get bored by looking at a scene and just waiting for it to finish. To get my soundtrack, I used GarageBand. I found my soundtrack and then imported it into Final Cut Pro. However, when I did this, I had to make sure that each scene was consistently edited. For example, when there was speech or a voiceover, I had to dip the sound so that the voiceover could be clearly heard. To do my voiceover, I took home a dictaphone and recorded the parts that I wanted to be spoken on top of my trailer. I then imported these and added them where I wanted them to go. Although my soundtrack did have to be edited, so the sound was dipped, and so I did this so that my voiceover was clear and could be clearly heard. When looking at one of my scenes in my trailer, we can see that I have imported a sound where the bat is swinging towards the camera. Here, the scene was also speeded up so that the viewer would be shocked and so that they did not expect it. I imported the sound of crash metal so that it seemed as if something had been broken when the bat swung towards the camera. This again was done to make my viewers jump and entertain them. To fade out the soundtrack and increase volume, I used point tools. When doing this, I was able to select certain points of audio and make it louder or quieter. I decided to use GarageBand as all of the audio is copyright free and very easy to use and find. I found the soundtrack that I wished to use and then imported it into Final Cut Pro. When looking at my evaluation, I again decided to use Final Cut Pro as I was already familiar with it and knew how to use it. To do this, I first of all recorded my audio using a dictaphone and then took multiple screenshots and synced them corresponding with my audio. However, this was a tedious task as each screenshot had to be increased or decreased in length depending on how long I was talking for. One criticism of what I have done is that I could have used iMovie instead. I found that using this software could have been much quicker. Individual screenshots would not have to be taken. The image could be simply imported and the bit that I wanted to show could have been selected. Motion could also have been added. When recording my evaluation, I decided to use QuickTime. This was very easy to use, all I had to do was open up the program and select a new movie recording. Using QuickTime, I was also able to record what was happening on screen. This was extremely beneficial as I was able to clearly show how I did specific things. This also allowed me to show parts of my trailer. When looking at new media technologies, I would say that the most useful technology that I used was iMovie. Not iMovie. Cancel that. Apple iMotion, as this allowed me to create fantastic titles and allowed me to bring them onto the screen in a unique way. This made my media package and trailer stand out.